30 years is we have migrated from using potable supply for irrigation to using reclaimed water. So it does a lot of things. Primarily, it keeps the effluent from out of the lagoon and keeps it on the yards, and it recycles it back into the aquifer. So basically what you're looking at here is an average wastewater flow. In 2025, you're looking at about 4.5 mg. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. There's not as many people connected to the sewer system. That's part of it. So you don't have that. You have a lot of septic customers and others that are demanding water that are not necessarily generating sewage. Additionally, you have certain, what I'll call consumptive uses, irrigation, that are not going to end up as sewage flow back to the plant. Peak month, you've got essentially capacity that carries you out significantly forward. There are plans to do some expansion, primarily for redundancy, for being able to do periodic renewal and replacement, those types of things. But this is kind of a brief snapshot that shows you, as Amy said, that planning is taking place, and you have a community that is planning and thinking ahead and doing the right things. So thank you. I'll bring it back to Pete. Okay. So that's an engineer's engineer right there. I think we're going to hopefully get to what's going to be really fun here if I can get this thing to work. But I think before we just do the audience polling, I think what just this little session sort of articulates is that we think about things, initially in character terms, and I showed some images that were about character. But then you have to have, what is the economic picture? What is the socio-demographic picture of your community, and how do we understand it? How do we start to articulate things through the legal constructs that we have, through our comprehensive plan and our zoning? And then ultimately, how do technicians work in a very, very detailed way to solve complicated problems like, do we have utility capacity? Do we have roadway capacity? Do we have the capacity financially to do the things that we want to do? So that's why this is very hard, and these conversations get very complex very quickly. So what I want to do after having heard that is I'd like to maybe sort of raise up in altitude again a little bit, and let me see if I can do this. Is that it? Okay, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. I need help from Anna. But this is going to be really fun if it works. We have this first one is a test question. And while she's doing this, and this is a test question, I will honestly tell you, we needed a test question. I thought of the NCAA tournament. I picked 4 teams that I thought there's no way those 4 teams are going to get knocked out in the first weekend. They'll all still be alive for the finals. And 2 of them are already gone. Men or women? This is men's. I had to take Virginia off of there. Who saw that coming? Okay. You got it? Any trouble? There we go.
Get 0 for 0. There should be 350 there.
Can we
go back?
Okay. The secret behind that. Here we go. See where you are? I see what they did. Hold, please.
You are so much smarter than me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we voting now?
In just a second.
Hang on.
We have the test question, and then we have real questions. If we can make this work.
Hey, Michelle. We got two different teams going up here. Maybe they can grab a snack, walk around.
Okay, yeah, why don't we let's just take 5 minutes, get snacks, use the restroom,
And then, yeah, get some water. And work on your questions.
Careful, got it.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. No. That's good. No, that's perfect. Okay, we did.
We did get it working, so about 5 minutes, let's get back together and then we can do the questions. If you're at your table and you want to test vote, grab a clicker and press 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and we'll test and make sure that this is working. And I will tell you that for all of the questions that we're going to ask tonight, all of the voting is going to get recorded and posted on the website. We have 117, 120 votes already. We have 150 voters. So we have about 170 voters. Give you a couple of more minutes to find your way back to your table.
Good or evil.
And anyone else that wants to test vote, and then we'll start the questions for real. You can't see how people are voting because we don't want to influence anybody's vote. I'll close the vote in a moment, and then we'll see what the totals are. And there's no pot associated with this, unfortunately. We should have had everybody put in $1 when they came in the room.
So I think there's some confusion.
Just, you only hit the number. Just hit the number. That's all you need to do. You don't need to hit send. And I do want to commend the city for thinking of this. This is a technique that requires some advanced thinking to reserve these units, and the technology is a little complex, as you probably can see. But it is a way to get some immediate response to some questions, which I think will be interesting for all of us here in a few minutes. One more minute, and then we'll close the voting on our test question. Okay, has everyone that's voted wanted to vote? Okay, I'm going to close the voting at 200 and, can we get to 230 people? Here we go, 230. Oh my gosh, look at this. Look at all these people voting. Okay, has everybody had a chance to test the clicker? All right, so who's going to win? Is it going to be just the field? Or do we think actually one of these four teams can actually win it? Wow, Florida State, really? Oh my goodness. Well, they had a great win the other night against Xavier, so maybe they're going to be hot. 20% for the field and 22% for the team that I've been told is the most talented team, which is Villanova. So we'll see what happens. Okay, let's go to some real questions, a little more substantive. And we're going to start by just sort of talking about who's in the room, and then we're going to talk about things that are important or things that we're concerned about in terms of the character of the community. So let's start here. Where do you live? I live in New Smyrna Beach. I live outside. I'm in the county. I'm in a neighboring city, or I actually live outside Volusia County. Let's give this a couple of minutes. This is very effective. People are voting quickly. You can see how fast the numbers going up. Thank you, Anna. And tech team. Okay, we're up to about 250. Want to wait another minute? Has everybody been able to click? I'm going to close it in about 10 seconds here. Okay, looks like we're at about 265. Okay, so for the most part, we're all New Smyrna Beach residents. That's very interesting. But we do have a few people from outside. That's okay. Okay, how long have you lived in New Smyrna Beach? 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10, 10 to 20. Mayor Hathaway has lived here his whole life, so he has to vote for. And I don't live in New Smyrna Beach. That's for those handful of folks that were from outside of New Smyrna. Oh, I've lived, well, if you're more than 20, you're a lifer. I think after 20, you get to count yourself as a lifer. All right, we're up around 270, about 10 more seconds. Everybody in? Okay, I'm going to close this. Okay, so this is very interesting to me because it's a very even spread. What this tells me is that what we have in New Smyrna is a mix of people that have got substantial roots in the community, but also people that have chosen to come here recently because it's a great place. I mean, I think this kind of illustrates a little bit the dynamic of how New Smyrna is, kind of behaving in terms of, the residential cross-section of folks that are here. Is anyone surprised by this? Okay. If you live in New Smyrna Beach, do you live year-round? Are you seasonal, or you don't live in New Smyrna Beach? You guys are getting good at this. We're getting up to 270 in like 15 seconds. Okay, another couple seconds. It seems like we have about 275 kind of working tonight, so it seems like our top number. Okay, I'll close this. Okay, so most of the folks in the room are year-round residents. That's great. Okay, do you work in New Smyrna Beach? I work in New Smyrna Beach. I work and own a business in New Smyrna Beach. And this is I work outside New Smyrna Beach, and then 4 is I'm retired living the good life. Okay. A few more seconds. Got it? Okay, I'm going to close it. that's the whole community, but it does mean that that's this room. So that's interesting. And I can't wait to be retired, so I do hope you're all living a good life. So, are you a business owner in New Smyrna Beach? You own your own local business. So this might be one of the local businesses here downtown or somewhere else, nearby. You own or manage a regional business, like maybe you manage a chain or a franchise of something. And the other is you don't own a business in New Smyrna Beach. What was that? A home business? That counts. That's I own my own local business.
I need to change my vote.
Actually, you can. If you vote again, it cancels. The transponder will cancel your old entry and put in a new entry. You can vote again if you want. You don't get two votes. The transponder knows how to cancel your old vote. Okay? Don't own a business in New Smyrna Beach, okay? And then 23% have local business. Okay? So let's talk about things that are really top of mind. And the way we've kind of structured a handful of these questions is we're going to do them kind of sequentially. There's many things that folks are concerned about. So we wanted to kind of start by saying, if you could pick one thing that is just the most critical thing, but then we're going to give you a chance on some of these to give us your second or third most important thing. So we can kind of rank some of these a little bit. So your biggest fears about current impacts from growth, what would be your top choice? What is the most significant thing that you are concerned about? And really that the city team needs to go to work on at the policy level and at the technical level. Let's give it a few more seconds. Okay, let's take a look. I'm going to close it. It's interesting. Okay, so transportation is number one. Beach overcrowding, it's interesting, that's not number one, although I'm sure it's a concern. Environmental and the quality and character of development. So let's take a look at number two. Tell us what your second choice would be. Okay, I'm going to close it. Okay, so really, I think that what that tells us is that, these three issues, these are really, really critical issues, and we've got data, and we need to work on these things a little bit. So let's drill a little bit deeper. If you think about transportation as something that's most important to folks, think about what your thoughts might be about the strategy to address the transportation system. Do we add lanes, new linkages and capacity to increase vehicle efficiency? Should we be more concerned about calming speed, even if it means less vehicle efficiency? Should we be focusing on bike and ped facilities, even if it means less vehicle efficiency? Should we be thinking about other multimodal options, like ride-share, trolley, circulators? Or should there be some sort of, integrated, multi-pronged thing that somehow addresses all of those things? And we're going to give you a second choice here too. So this is your top choice. How should we be thinking about transportation? Ready? A couple more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close it. Okay, so we realize that there's no magic bullet to the transportation challenges. We're going to need to do a little bit of everything. We're going to need balanced solutions. That's interesting. Second choice, anybody want to throw in a second choice? We're setting you up, Richard. Okay, I'm going to close it in a minute. Second, ready? Okay. So I think what this really talks about is how complex the transportation questions are, and that we're going to need multiple solutions. And I think that what this really shows is that bigger, faster roads isn't necessarily going to solve a lot of problems. We need to have integrated solutions. And maybe in some cases, they need to be character-based solutions. You may not be able to drive quite as quickly through New Smyrna Beach as you might like, but maybe the drive will be higher quality, safer, more multimodal, easier to walk, easier to bike. There are trade-offs here, and I think we're going to have to deal with some of those trade-offs. What community services are you most concerned about impacts from growth? We heard a couple of things about utilities, that there is some advanced planning for utility capacity as growth occurs. Give it about 5 or 6 more seconds. Everybody's participating so well. That magic number is like 270, and I know everyone's in. Okay, I'm going to close it. You ready? Okay. Utilities. Okay. So maybe we need to have a little more discussion about that. I mean, I think we heard some very high-level outlines of that, but we need to talk about that some more going forward as part of this program. What in your daily life is the most sort of visceral or personal indication, good, bad, or other, that New Smyrna Beach is growing? What's affecting you personally? Okay, a couple more seconds. Got it? Okay, I'm going to close it. Transportation. I mean, that's really what this boils down to, right? If we could think about something positive to do with growth, if you can put yourself in that place. And I think we did talk, I'm being a little facetious here, we did talk earlier about some wonderful transformations that have happened, for instance, on Canal Street. If you do think about growth in a positive light, what are the things that can actually, that can be positive outcomes from growth if we can guide growth correctly? Okay, a few more seconds. All the way in. Keep waiting for 270. There it is. All right. Good. Interesting. Economic stability, strengthen neighborhoods, and the ability to support quality retail. What would be your second choice? And I think we're almost done with these. There's just a few more. Ready? Almost. still really focusing on economic stability, community services, and quality businesses. If you think about New Smyrna Beach compared to peer communities, whatever those peer communities you think might be, but I think if we could focus on the Florida East Coast, do you think the character is mostly in line with your expectations for coastal communities, that New Smyrna Beach is better or in line with your expectations? Do you think New Smyrna Beach is not doing as well as its peers, or it's about the same as its peers? Okay, a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close. Okay. I mean, I think you should feel good about that, because I think that's a true statement. There's things to work on, but gosh, this is a great town. We just need to work on a few things. Mostly transportation and apparently utilities. And some other things. I don't want to be glib. Now, this is an important question for you. I feel that potential impacts to my quality of life in New Smyrna Beach are driven more by tourism and vacationers, downtown growth, which would be, for instance, maybe the redevelopment of some key properties on some of these corridors, or regional growth, which is really some of the growth that we talked about towards the west, or other areas sort of out in what we call the green field, out towards 95. Does that make sense? I think what I'm asking is when you think about the impacts that you are experiencing or will likely experience from growth, is your feeling that it will come more, that those impacts are being manifested as a result of increasing tourism and people visiting New Smyrna Beach? Is it a result of development or redevelopment that's happening essentially in town, in the traditional city? Or are you most concerned about what might happen out on your western flank towards I-95 and how that might affect the city?
Is the answer going to be affected by the fact that we have negative or positive feelings about that quality?
I'm not sure how to answer that. So in other words, if it's you're saying if it's quality development in one area, you might not have a problem. If it's not quality development in a certain area, you have a big problem.
I'm looking at it as I feel the potential impact to my increased quality of life is going to be driven more by tourism, downtown, or regional.
Okay, let's come back to that. Okay, I think everybody's in. Oh, no!
You had 260 people.
Right.
Can we redo it?
I did it.
We can't go back? I'm sorry, we may have to scrap that question. It is an important question. Maybe we'll replay it when we talk about economic development. But I think what this does say is that there's a real concern about this is showing tourism and vacationers as being more significant necessarily than downtown growth, but maybe the largest kind of latent concern out there is what might happen out on the west side.
But this doesn't mean anything if some people are answering it positively and some people are answering it negatively.
Right.
It's like canceling out each other.
Right. Yeah, okay, and I apologize if this wasn't worded clearly. I think it may be a throwaway. Yeah, what we meant to say was that potential impacts as a negative, things that would impact you in a negative way. Yeah, I'm sorry. What time of year are community quality of life impacts, those would be negative, something that you would perceive as a negative impact, most pronounced? Yes, a quality of life impact. Something that is negatively impacting your quality of life. And that's really what the other one was meant to say as well. Okay, I'm going to close it. A few more. Everybody in? The winners. The snowbirds, and then, you know, a good chunk that is more or less the same all year round. That's interesting. Bikers. Okay. And what would be your second choice? Couple more seconds. Everybody almost in? Okay. Interesting. Summer. So kind of winter, summer, and all year round. But it seems like really, I think what I'm really seeing is that probably winter and summer, you know, those are the push seasons. Couple more. When new development is proposed, what entity would you rather see guide the review and approval process of that development? You prefer the city has local control over new regional growth. You prefer the county to guide regional growth and approve development. Or you prefer new growth occur in other nearby cities. I'm just putting it out there. A few more seconds. Okay. Interesting. So, we agree on one thing. We don't love development in the county. I think probably there's certain types of development that folks might prefer to see somewhere else. But I think the other thing that comes out of this was such a strong percentage that the city has local control is that there is a healthy cohort of people that wants to be self-determinant about what happens here, how it happens, you know, and let's keep, you know, to the extent that we're going to have debates about what should be going on, let's keep it in the family, is kind of what I'm hearing. Okay, should the city focus on encouraging growth? Where should the city focus on encouraging growth? Make your top choice. So redevelopment of underutilized sites in sort of the traditional town, redevelopment in the historic west neighborhood, the US 1 corridor and sort of the airport area, the I-95 and State Road 44 corridors to the west, or all of the above if it's done well. And we're going to give you a top choice and then a second choice. So where, if we're going to have growth, where do you think it should be focused? None of the above, okay. But I think there's not really a real number 6. I mean, we didn't put that because I don't think that's reality. It just isn't. So I think we have to think about how we want to guide. We can limit. We can slow down. We can control density. Okay. So focusing on US 1 and the airport. And some folks say all of the above if it's done well. So let's get a second choice, if there is one. Okay? A few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close it. US 1. So at least that validates your mission, right, for redevelopment in the corridor and towards the airport. And the airport,
Thank you.
the airport is an untapped economic possibility for the city, we believe, over time. And then this is a question: at what average annual percentage is the city growing? And I think we're towards the end of this. At what average annual percentage is the city growing?
Best guess. Best guess.
By population, at what rate is the city growing right now? Over the last 5 years.
But a more important question is what level do you want to see the city grow?
Right, but to answer that question, there's a lot of perception. And so one thing would be to understand what is our perception right now about what level it's growing at. Yes? Sure. Okay, good.
She does know it already. We already.
So the point that she made was that she appreciates that the US 1 corridor is a redevelopment opportunity, but she doesn't want to see the airport region turn into an international hub or.
The business park at the airport, we should really,
Yeah,
focus on that.
yeah. Okay, let's close the voting on this. So we think it's growing about 6%, and Tony, it's actually growing at less than 2. So reality and perception are. Yes. Yeah. That's the fixed population. It's between 2 and 3%. But the feeling is that it's much more. And I think that's seasonal, and it's tourism, and it's other factors. And then, what data points are most important to you to understanding what's actually happening in the community? And this kind of goes back to the previous question about perception. Is it more data about, census data to track residents and where people live and, who's here permanently, who's here seasonally, et cetera? Is it about traffic counts? Is it about building permits? The number of businesses that we have, our tax rates? What things are really important to you to really know on a regular, recurrent basis? A few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close it. So it's really understanding building permits and traffic counts. So let me try to restate then how I sort of filter that, is that people are concerned about, first of all, we know transportation is a huge issue of concern. And then it's really understanding, how much vertical construction is happening, where is it happening, what's the character of it, does it feel right for New Smyrna Beach? Is that stated more or less correctly? Okay. And then I think we're almost to the last one. How long does it typically take for a large residential project to build out? And I'm talking about a large master plan community like Venetian Bay. When we think about this development to the west, how fast do we think it will happen? Build out means if I have a large planned unit development that's 400 or 500 acres, how long do we think it'll take that entire project and whatever homes are permitted there to develop and be sold? And in Venetian Bay would be an example. Okay, I'm going to close it in just a second. $10 years plus, and that's pretty much the case. That these projects take a long time. And what can the city influence on development land with pre-existing land use rights? What can the city do to ensure better outcomes for development? What should the city be focused on? Should it be design standards through the land development code, zoning and intensity and use? Is it about requiring more connectivity, requiring more open space and landscaping, or that the city really doesn't have a voice and can't influence development? How do you feel about this? Okay, a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close it. So it really is about zoning and land development regulations. If we can get those right and deliver quality development, that should be a focus for the city, and that can be a focus for the city. And so with that, I want to actually, okay, now I gotta operate this thing again. Did we lose the other selection? What I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and invite Richard Levy to come up. So I'm going to have Richard Levy come up and talk a little bit about some of these character things that other communities have worked with and give some perspective.
Good evening, thank you, Pete. Before I introduce myself, a little bit of city trivia, a little Florida city trivia, and see if you agree with this. In Brevard County, the largest city is Palm Bay. Everybody agree with that? I think it's pretty close? No? In Polk, it's Lakeland. You know Polk County? In Volusia, it's Deltona. Everybody agree? Okay. I'm gonna ask you to think a little bit out of the box. The largest city in Brevard is actually unincorporated Brevard. The largest city in Polk is unincorporated Polk. And the largest city in Volusia is unincorporated Volusia. Now, my name's Richard Levy, and I've been studying cities in Florida for a long time. I actually look like I'm 35 years old, but I've been studying cities in Florida for 35 years as a city planner, as a city manager, and as an academic. And I'm fascinated with the evolution and growth of Florida cities and how they function as how they relate to their surroundings. The reason why it's important to understand why the unincorporated areas are considered cities is because they actually get municipal services, right? The sheriff provides police, they have a county fire department, they get municipal services like you. They don't get the same quality, they don't get them in the same way, but they do get municipal services, so they are considered municipal developed areas in the profession. That's why we consider the unincorporated areas large cities. This new development on the edges of these cities are approved by counties in the unincorporated area. And sometimes they happen decades earlier. Some have been around for a long time. And then the cities, the core cities, are faced with covering the financial impact of that development it has on your roads, your parks and recreation, and your public safety. Whether those developments ever come into the city or not, they're going to impact your roads. They're going to impact your parks. And to some extent, your public safety because of people reusing your facilities and coming into your city. Cities are better off, in my opinion, having those projects in the city to have better control over the quality and character of new development, the timing of improvements that are required to accommodate that growth, contributions, financial contributions to the required infrastructure, and of course, the revenue to pay for the cost of the impact on city services. Now, I do a lot of work in Florida, and I work for a lot of cities, and I want to compare what I'm calling West New Smyrna Beach to the city of Mount Dora. So, raise of hands, who knows Mount Dora? Okay, who's been to Mount Dora? Okay, gorgeous little town. I drove from Mount Dora today. I made a presentation on this very subject to the City Council of Mount Dora today. They're facing very similar issues. But I want to compare Mount Dora to New Smyrna Beach to give you a sense of why I think they're analogous. Now, you're bigger in terms of population compared to the state. You can see the two cities compared. Household income, very, very close. Education level, very close. You're a little bit older than Mount Dora in median age, but you can see the profile of the two cities is very, very similar. They're both have historic downtowns. You're both festival cities. You both have traditional cities. And when I think of the term traditional city, I'm talking about historic platted streets on a grid, walkable neighborhoods, very much a character. Pete talked about it earlier. Both of these cities have a historic core or traditional area that is very different from the suburbs or the outlying areas. And you both have strong character traditional cities. You're both tourism-based economies. Now, Mount Dora is facing a very similar situation on its perimeter. There's a new beltway exit that's going to be coming close to Mount Dora's right here, and they're now going to be attached to a limited access highway. Now, you've had 95 for a long time. That's probably why those developments were approved decades ago. But this is new for Mount Dora, and the same kind of pressures are coming to the suburban area, and they have the same kind of concerns of what growth will do to their traditional city. It's really remarkable, the parallels. And you can see the traditional Mount Dora, you can see the gridded street pattern, and you can see to the east the new interchange and the areas that are going to be, that are under very, very active development pressure. So, what can cities do to grow without losing their character? And I think that's the essence of the challenge that lies in my opinion, in West New Smyrna Beach. You have the traditional city to the east. You have this new West New Smyrna Beach to the west, similar to the pressure that Mount Dora is facing. Now, in West New Smyrna Beach, there's some history here. One can maybe suggest that the West, in terms of new growth, accommodates the demand for housing in your region that otherwise might put more pressure on your traditional city. It might allow for you to relax and lower densities and intensities in the traditional city and accommodate growth to the west. Certainly, the pressures for intensity of building heights in the traditional city may, in fact, be somewhat relieved by the ability to accommodate the growth to the west. It appears to me that somewhere along the line there was an intentional growth management strategy to protect the traditional core of the city in your past. So in summary, large-scale projects on the edges of traditional cities in Florida are very common. Preserving the character of the traditional city is very important, and there are things that you can do and go in and plan the perimeter areas, the new outlying areas, to ensure that you get a higher quality of development while still preserving the character of your traditional city. There are methods to do this in new growth corridors, and treating your traditional city one way and treating your new growth corridors a completely different way is really the sort of bimodal strategy that most cities are adopting to solve the problem and the concerns for these new areas having impact on your traditional city. And the challenge for both of these cities is how to adapt to this change while still maintaining your unique character. With that, I'll be available for any questions later on when we get into the panel. Pete?
Thanks, Richard. So, do we have our basket of yellow questions? Run, Anna, run. Thank you. Awesome. So we can't do them all tonight, but we thought we could maybe just do a few and try to, and that was literally picked at random. It doesn't get, yes, I'm going to read it. Okay, question. Oh, and Pam, did you want to come up to be on the panel?
Sure. After that introduction.
All right. So, question. Bushell Island uses reclaimed water to end pipes broken in the river. The city is proposing use of potable water. Any hope for Bushell to use reclaimed water again?
I know about it, but just real quick. Utilities Commission is actually separate from the City Commission. We also have the same concern because we're going to have to go to potable water for irrigation along our medians. So what we're encouraging everyone to do is actually go to the Utilities Commission, and we have asked that question as well. So we've already forwarded your question on to the Utilities Commission on that, because the city is also being impacted.
Good question. Okay. Keep State Road 44 green trees between new development and the traffic. So I think this is a really important conversation, and I think it's not just a character conversation, but it's also a part of what we should talk about in the transportation section. Because I think the character of the entry to New Smyrna Beach as a green corridor and what those setbacks are and what sort of the tree canopy and sort of the ecology and the appearance of all of that does impact how the community is going to be perceived. It impacts your environmental quality. It impacts the ability to use that roadway corridor for something other than purely a car tube. If we want to actually have maybe a regional trail, like a West Orange Trail type of idea, happening on that roadway someday. So I absolutely think that finding ways to get other forms of performance out of State Road 44 than just a car tube is a really important idea.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
The question is, and the reason is that by law you need a separation, but it's not followed. So the uniqueness of New Smyrna Beach is disappearing. It was a green corridor.
Right.
It was different than any other city.
Right.
It's disappearing.
We're losing it.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the city doesn't follow their instructions by law.
Okay. So, you want to respond to that? I think what I would say is I think that looking at, first of all, I showed those maps earlier, and there's large stretches of 44 that are in the city, but there's also large stretches that are in the county. And so I think that what we need to look at going forward, whatever the rules are, or whatever property you may be referring to, and whether it's in the city or in the county, I think the point is that in a go-forward view, we need to recognize the importance of taking charge of the visual appearance and the multimodal characteristics of that road as a corridor that needs to be more livable than it is today. And we can't just let it continue to strip out with just, off-the-rack commercial strip development. Right? I mean, that's effectively what you are saying in a go-forward sort of way. We have to take charge of that corridor.
I hope so.
Okay, I good. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. So this is where my bifocals are going to start to kick in, if I wish I had some. Okay, landscape, i.e. palm trees, US 1 median. It says continuous parking for beach, no, Something about parking for beach use, possibly for a third bridge. That's an interesting question. Should there ever be a third bridge? Okay. Edgewater is the place for the third bridge. So I'm going to ask Nana to please make sure that I get questions that I can read. That'd be good. But see, this is an interesting trade-off. There's a lot of things about this that are trade-offs, and I'll tell you, the transportation session is going to be really, really important. You know, if there's only a couple of ways to get over to the beach side, that puts pressure on 44. And you know, I can just tell you, you know, I know we're not supposed to talk about Orlando or Central Florida, but I mean, I can just tell you that 15 or 18 years ago, I was on a pretty significant project for the city of Winter Park. And the city of Winter Park made a very deliberate decision in the face of FDOT. And they said, we know that we need to widen our roads and make them go faster, but we're just not going to have that going through the center of our community. And we're going to accept a little bit slower traffic in order to maintain our character and try to improve bikeability and walkability and tree canopy in our city. And if that means that people are just going to have to behave a little differently on Fairbanks as they come through the Rollins College Park Avenue area, then that's just what they're going to have to do. Because we're gonna value that over the regional desire to turn Fairbanks into a car tube. And so I think when we say we don't want to have another bridge, what we're really saying is we're all in on 44. 44's, that's our bridge. But we're going to have to balance it, and we're going to have to start to really work with 44, with the county, with the state, and make some trade-off decisions. And we might start valuing character over capacity. I think that's what we're saying. Is that right?
Comment about Edgewater is good.
Is there an evacuation plan for beachside residents? Is that included within the overall city plan? And the answer is, of course there is. Does anyone want to expand on that in any way?
Well, of course there is. Is anybody at Beachside that didn't evacuate during the last two storms? We certainly closed both classrooms off. Yes, of course there is, and there's ample notice both on the county and the city's website. So, yes.
All right, but that doesn't mean people do it just because you say.
Well, that doesn't mean people do it. Yes, some people write it out, and that's a whole other conversation. The first planner, which could be any of us, it might be me, spoke about infilling development. Couldn't we not infill and save our green spaces? If there are delinquent properties, we could raise them and build parks or community gardens. Okay, you want to maybe talk about, does anyone want to talk about sort of infill development in the traditional city?
Well, Chalice and White. We're doing
The White Chalice development. So how do folks feel about some of the new kind of townhome, and there's even some live-work types of development that are happening, you know, literally right over here behind City Hall, off of Canal Street. That would be an example of infill development. There were properties in there that were underutilized, and those properties have redeveloped with you know, sort of small and medium scale residential, as opposed to going out in the greenfield. So I think what that says is that the redevelopment within the established urban area is, in a sense, kind of by definition, more sustainable, because you already have urban services there and so forth and so on. But as that happens, we have to recognize that there will be change, there will be new development occurring in these established areas, and it really is about character and quality. And these are things that you can engage on. And I will say, you know, I had a slide that I had to skip, and I want to show this one slide, because I want to make one point about maybe the paradigm. I actually had several slides I was going to follow up on, but we had the computer glitch. I want to share maybe one perspective on how I think about what's happening in New Smyrna Beach and some of the things that I think people get very, very passionate about and get into these sort of heated community debates about. I think we have to recognize that the scale of what we're talking about, and to the extent that we have arguments, the scale of what we're arguing about is so much smaller within the entire spectrum of things that are happening out in the world. So this is a picture, this is one of the better pictures that I can take of Clearwater Beach, okay? There's other pictures of Clearwater Beach that you could take that, you know, it's 20-story buildings all the way down the beach, right? What I did with this picture is I did a little work with Google to sort of figure out where some of these building lines were, and I related it to your height standards in your current zoning code. And you've got areas of residential that are at 30 feet, you've got some areas of residential and mixed use that are at 50, and then you've got some areas where you allow some more height and you're up around 72, 75 feet. And unless you're grandfathered in with a much older building that already exceeds 75 feet, that's it. And what I think is important about this, if you look at the picture, if you could look at the left side of the picture, you notice the tree here. You know, most of the environmental canopy kind of tops out at about 50 or 60 feet. And so what I would say is that while not every development that's occurred here has maybe been done in the way that maybe each one of us might select that it would be done, and there's certainly buildings I see that it's not how I would have done it, or that's not my favorite building, but I don't want to point those out because some of you may live in some of those buildings. The point is that the entire universe that we're having this debate in is within an envelope that is relatively proportional to the environmental profile of the island and of the waterfront. And that is not the case for so many other beach communities. And so I'm not trying to say that every project isn't worthy of healthy debate, but I also think that in order to have constructive debate, we should recognize that we are doing a reasonably decent job of keeping the overall discussion within a small or extra small, kind of paradigm, as opposed to large XL, 2XL, which some of these other communities are dealing with. So I just think that, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
That was my question, and I just wanted to ask, is there a percentage of green that we will not go below? Is there a place for our birds and our...
That's a great question.
And
so the question is, and I'm gonna let Amy, you wanna take this? Yeah, so the question is, and I think it's a comp plan question, which is something that Amy can jump on this. The question is, how do you establish some baseline minimums for environmental open space, for tree canopy, for pervious surface, as opposed to impervious paved surface? How do you do that?
I want to look at the person and ask. Hi. Right now, in our plan unit development land use standards, we require a 50% open space requirement. So if you were to look at the plan unit development map that we're developing, it's not ready yet. We started working on it last week and realized that there were a lot of very old county PUDs. We require 50% open space right now. So all those PUDs that are out there around I-95 and State Route 44, we require 50% open space. The reason why it's hard for the average human to tell is because every developer pushes that 50% open space to the back, and you just don't recognize it. Now on straight zoning, I don't want to teach a whole planning 101 class. Richard teaches one at UCF. He'd be happy to educate everybody. But when we have a straight zoning, if you're zoned R1, R2, we have a difficult time controlling the amount of open space in those types of zoning districts. But when you're a planned unit development, when you're a large swath of land, and I'm not going to pick out any particular developer, we do require 50%. And it varies in certain types. Go ahead, I'm sorry. I'll carry on, and we have to end the date.
golf courses count as open space?
Do golf courses count as open space? Yes. Let me say something about golf courses, though. I had another slide that I was going to show, and Richard can speak to this. When we think about the development to the west, and we think about Venetian Bay, you know, the golf course community paradigm is really becoming an antiquated model for community. And what's happening more and more now, and this is a newer community, and it's actually about environmental amenities, and it's about community gardening. It's a completely different model for what community should be. And I wonder if Richard could maybe talk about what's happening with community development these days.
Well, I think, Pete, your statement that the golf course community, and some of you may live in golf course communities, the data shows that as an amenity, it's losing its value in the real estate community. And so you don't see new projects with golf courses. And what you do see is a complete new thinking about how to amenitize projects. The graphic that Pete's got there, the picture, lots of new suburban development is becoming much more walkable, much more livable. The street design is very, very different. The old cul-de-sac, you still see them, but you see developments occurring in a different way. There's a shift going on, and it's happening in the home building industry, and there's lots of pressure between what buyers want and what communities want. They seem to be bridging the gap, but subdivision design and amenities are all changing away from golf, away from long streets, single-loaded dead-end streets, much more of a walkable community with a whole array of different types of amenities. Biking and walking is sort of the new golf.
You don't have to go very far. Go to Florida Days. That's in the city. Look at the design there. Now, if that developer can do it, why can't the rest do it?
Sure.
How many variances do you grant to things like the Chevrolet dealership to tear down trees? You talk about open space requirements, but you give a lot of variances.
Sure.
I just want to say one thing on the variances. The variances are granted by a citizen advisory board. People just like yourself, who, just like you, make the best decisions they can. So those variances actually come to a public meeting with public comment, and they are granted or not granted by a group of citizens from the city of New Smyrna Beach.
It's not unbiased towards
Amy will tell you they went to midnight less than 2 weeks ago. So if you want to serve on that board, we usually get between 15 and 20 applications for every vacancy. The commission's always looking for folks that have a background or want to be part of the solution. P&Z, they don't get a lot of love on their side of the issue that they vote on. So if you want to come to those meetings and attend them, they're usually the first Monday of every month. They've been going to about midnight because of the development petitions that are coming in. But they are citizens that live in the city of New Smyrna Beach, just like you.
I want to just maybe say one last thing about the large plan unit developments that I think maybe closes the loop on a few things. First of all, we said earlier that we recognize that some of these developments, it takes 10 plus years for these things to build out. We recognize that there's economic cycles. We recognize that the 44 corridor is a significant corridor, and there's a lot of land on that corridor. So for better or worse, I think we have a little bit of time. I don't think it's all going to develop in the next 24 months. If we can, and the other point I guess that I wanted to make between these two slides is that the paradigm of how development is happening, and this gentleman cited, obviously a positive example, the paradigm of how development is happening for both commercial development and residential development, and oh, by the way, I had some slides about what's happening in commercial development. We know retail is changing, right? The paradigm of what's happening in that form of development is changing all the time. And as those landowners or developers come to the city, there's an opportunity to negotiate because they're going to need to change something about what they're trying to do. And the city has the opportunity to speak with them through the various boards that you have, as well as maybe some land development regulations that we're working on right now, to get a better outcome. And if there's a vision like that the State Road 44 corridor should be a green environmental corridor with development set back, these are the types of things that we can decide on to work as a community over the next decade and ensure that that development comes online in a way that is more amenable to the character that we want, and not just everybody's off the rack product and we're sort of the victims of whatever, the lowest common denominator of development is. That's what we don't want. And so I think maybe this is a good place. Is there maybe one more question for tonight? People are starting to leave, and I don't want people to feel like you know, I don't want to go past our time, and I also don't want people to feel like they've missed conversation.
Why don't you just enact these, density and, green corridors into the zoning regulations up front? Just make them regulations. The city's got the hammer.
Yes, so let's talk about sort of zoning, the ability to modify and manipulate our zoning and land development code. Would you say something about that?
Without getting too deeply into it, because our zoning regulations are literally this thick, and I wasn't accurate in fully explaining how we define open space, because we have a couple of different definitions and whether or not it's natural, man-made. For instance, golf courses doesn't fully encompass, and people are leaving by the droves. But let me just go ahead and say that there is a comprehensive plan, and it is the underlying foundation for our land development regulations. So with that being said, as we go through the comprehensive plan update, that is the foundation. Once we have that foundation updated, then we go to our land development regulations and we begin to update those regulations. But every single month, on the first Monday of every month, and sometimes more often, we revisit the land development regulations. And a lot of those planning and zoning members are here. I'm looking at one right now. I looked at one earlier. These are citizen boards that do this. So please understand, I am just a shepherd of these citizen groups that work on these regulations every single month. So we have a comprehensive plan that is the foundation for the land development regulations. There are plan unit developments, and there are straight zoning regulations that affect your properties, every single property in the city. And if you'd like to learn more, please visit our website, www.cityofnsb.com. Both your comprehensive plan, the land use plan map, and the land development regulations are on those websites. Anna Hackett, our PIO, knows how to get in touch with me. Again, my name's Amy King. I am planning director. But please feel free to reach out to us. And again, first Monday of every month is the planning and zoning meeting, and reach out to us.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This was a big audience. We do have one last question, and it's kind of a convenient question. These meetings have been informative and helpful, but what's next? The next meeting is about social equity. So if you look at the schedule that's on the board here, you know, we are looking at all aspects of community sustainability: physical, economic, and social. And there are some social equity things that we can talk about to the betterment of New Smyrna Beach. That's next month. Public safety, economy, parks and rec, tourism, transportation, all of those things are downstream. Please stay in touch. Last thing is, please leave the clickers on the table. And thank you so much for coming out. All the questions will be posted on the website.